Welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navic's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navic.co. This episode is brought to you by Dive. Most game studios have data, they just can't use it. Reports are slow, systems are fragmented, and the insights that should drive revenue stay buried. Dive changes that. Dive is a fully managed analytics and LiveOps platform built for game studios. No data team required. An impressive 95% of their clients grow revenue in year one. You can learn more at dive.games/scale or simply check out the link in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
Hi, and welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Moore. Today, we have a very different and special episode for you. We are recording from Cannes in the south of France at the Cannes Lions, which is one of the biggest advertising and marketing festivals in the entire world. And something very special happened this year. I was invited to be on the jury of the gaming category, as was Cheryl Platz, who is our guest today. Thanks so much for joining us, Cheryl.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about what the judging process was like. We're going to go through some of the different themes that we saw when it came to gaming submissions for gaming and entertainment. And we're also going to touch on what the future of brand integration with games looks like. But Cheryl, first of all, thank you for joining me. And I'd love if you could do a little bit more of an in-depth intro about yourself.
Of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Cheryl Platz, and I am currently a video game everything, video game adjunct instructor for Carnegie Mellon University, video game author, video game podcaster of a podcast called Enduring Play, which focuses on how to create sustainable video game experiences that thrive instead of just surviving. And I've had a career that spans both video games and more traditional product design experiences. I started in video games. I'm trained in computer science and human-computer interaction. But when my video game career kind of slowed down a little bit because people couldn't kind of get their head around a very young video game producer leading teams. And I was like, who is also a female. It's like, okay, cool. We'll try something else. And that's how I ended up spending 10 years doing things like being design lead of the Azure web platform for Microsoft, or being the design lead who was in charge of the notifications platform for Alexa, Amazon's Alexa. And so it's been this big roundabout journey. And then the last couple of years was UX director for Riot Games, UX director at Scopely. And currently I'm attending the festival independently as the creative director and owner of Idea Platz LLC, my design education company, with which I have spoken on 5 continents. I've taught workshops about voice interaction, about creative, building shared understanding amongst creatives in many disciplines. My day job is with the Pokemon Company International as creative director of their game studio, but I don't speak on their behalf or represent them in conversations like this. I'm very proud to be working with them, but that is separate from the conversation we're having here today and my service on the jury here at Cannes.
So we were 2 of 11 jury members, and we had a really diverse group of people, which obviously was by design, but I also think it was really interesting. And I mean diversity when it comes to backgrounds and different types of work, whether it's in gaming, brands, also geographical background. We had someone from South Africa. We had someone from France. We had someone from Japan, a couple of people from the States, from the UK. And I think the Informa, who puts this on, did a really great job of finding a mix of people that could look at the work and judge it with a lot of different experiences in the background. Before we get into the work itself, I know we talked about this a little bit last night. We were both very pleasantly surprised to be invited to the jury. And when we did a little bit of research, there wasn't that much details about the process of being on the jury and what that actually looks like. So I want to dive into that a little bit. Will you just share what your experience was from judging at home to what it looked like this last weekend when we were judging all together?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a fun journey. And for me, it started with a LinkedIn message. I believe that Lisa, who recruits many of the jurists, found me because of my work on my book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, which kind of aligned with what they were looking for, which was somebody who was from the games industry and can help represent sort of trends from the game development side. And there was a little bit of back and forth for me to help understand what was involved. But once I said yes, things happened very quickly. There was a briefing, and there's a commitment to do prejudging, where we, for the month, basically the end of April was when we had our first briefing. We all got to meet each other on Teams, and a very carefully selected time for all these different time zones. It's very international collaboration. And then they have actually really great digital tools where they start sending us entries as they are vetted, because there's also a very especially, I think it's new this year, but there's a pretty in-depth vetting process to make sure that these applications that people give for these award entries, which contain strategy and details on execution and details on impact, they spend a lot of time vetting to make sure that the impact is what people say it is, to maintain the integrity of the awards. So as the awards clear the process, and are vetted, they start showing up in our queue for us to go and evaluate them. And that there will be multimedia links for each of the entries, like the actual case video and an image, social media links, so we can click through and go see like what the actual discussion was, maybe in context, like if it was a YouTube video, go see what people were saying on it, and then the description that people would have entered. So, if you're working on one of these submissions and you're writing things, we do look at the write-ups quite a bit and refer to those over and over again during the process. But the first round of judging was very personal. It's you're in your home, you're doing it alone. There's lots of videos to prepare you for it, to help you understand the scale and everything. But we do this first round, which takes about a month, and then magic happens and they send us a mathematical shortlist. But the first round, there's so many entries that we don't get to see everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the second round is when you start to get to see things that maybe other jurors had reviewed, whatever happened to be mathematically sorted to the top. And then we do another round of at-home mathematical judging, and it is from that list that the shortlist draft gets created. And then that's where we start when we get here in person.
Yeah, I think that's a very great overview. So then we got here on Friday night. We're recording this on Monday, and I know this is going to air on Tuesday the following week. Once the winners have been announced, we can talk about them a little bit today. And then we met our jury, our fellow jury members, both for our category, and there's a ton of different categories here too. Of course, in entertainment, from sporting, from PR, but also in categories that I wasn't even aware of, like pharma, for instance. So lots of different categories for creativity being judged. And then on Saturday, we did our first round where we had roughly 30, I would say, on the list. And we had to narrow it down to 20, which was so challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really speaks to the quality and the breadth of work. And then we narrowed it down to 20. And then the following day, which was Sunday, we had to choose. It was 3 bronze, or did we get to add?
We had 4.
We got to add, there were 4 bronze, 2 silvers, 1 gold, and 1 Grand Prix. And this is going to be announced at an award show tomorrow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And one of the most interesting things about the process for me was, and they let you know this is going to happen beforehand, but they kind of break it's a scale of 1 to 9, and they kind of help you understand, like, well, these numbers are, maybe this is not an awards candidate. These numbers are, maybe we should talk about it. And these numbers are, you really feel like this is an awards candidate. And if you put something in your, I really think this is an awards candidate scale, when we get to the shortlisting in-person phase, there's an opportunity for us to flag things that didn't mathematically clear, but we still feel like should be discussed. And I love that part of the process because it helps us bring up things that we think maybe are representative of underrepresented groups or representative of a trend that maybe people didn't have all the context on. And we did have some really in-depth discussions about some things on that border. And so I love that the process wasn't just strictly mathematical. I mean, it is very much based on and inspired by that collectives math, but it's not like hard sell. It's like you can ask people to consider, have you taken a little extra context and use that while we're solidifying the list.
And I was very pleasantly surprised how open all the jury members were to reviewing work, exactly like you said, that didn't necessarily make the initial list of 30. There was definitely at least one that we brought back on that got ranked quite highly. And I think it was one that it actually wasn't in my first batch, but I know I would have overlooked it because it was smaller in scale than a lot of what we saw, but the impact was there. And we're going to get into that one a little bit later. But I would love if you could share with the audience, there's a lot of different scales. There's a lot of different types of games, just a couple of entries to show what we are looking at.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more at the inside the jury room session later this week about some trends, but personally, some of the trends and examples that I saw, and maybe I'll pull from some of the things on the border that didn't get awarded because we like to share the love. And let me think about things that we liked. I think there's the Resident Evil launch, right? This is a really interesting one for me because they submitted in the audio video category, and they had a really great, basically horror movie that's like 3 or 4 minutes long, and really great fan response. And the supporting materials talked about how they promoted that video, but when we got into the discussion, we're looking for creativity and we're looking for innovation. And it was interesting because that piece was really innovative in context with everything else that had gone on in the campaign. But it was hard, that was one of the ones I rated most highly, but it was hard in the room to lift it up as innovative because folks were like, well, I've seen this before. I've seen this kind of thing before. And sometimes you see a thing, you're like, gosh, I wish it was in another category. I wish I could bring more context in, or, oh, you submitted here and you submitted here. But what if it was like a launch, relaunch or something? You can't do that as a juror. You have to submit, you review the work in the categories that's submitted. But that's interesting, right? But it speaks to there's really great craft work. But the Lions have all kinds of different juries, right? There is a media category. And so really great filmmaking or short filmmaking can be recognized there. What is it about this piece that speaks to that really deserves to be in the gaming category? We were talking about the, brand. I believe the description is basically like promotion of brands that celebrates them through gameplay, right? And like, where is the gameplay here? And so that's the kind of conversation that we have in the room. And there was another piece that was really close that we loved. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right. Capybara.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Capybara. Yeah, Capybara P.
That one was, and that brought up a really interesting conversation around gaming trends.
Yep.
Because this is that was a submission from, and I never pronounced this brand correctly, the beer brand, Hogarden. But
yeah,
I know when I watched the videos, it was like, I don't ever pronounce that. But anyway, maybe we'll look that up.
We'll link to
we'll link to the correct pronunciation,
yes,
but
in the show notes.
So the beer Hogarden, who is in China, was looking for a way to connect with their local fans, and the capybara, I think is the animal, was a meme. And known for calmness, and so they were like, well, let's just build arcade cabinets where we'll build a game where you can pet these capybaras in there. And the discussion was interesting at first because people were like, well, what's a game about petting this behind? But that was where we got to talk about some of the things from like I'd observed while writing my book about like a lot of players now play for comfort. They play for self-soothing. This actually connected to something that's very real and very now. But what was challenging for that one was just so small scale.
Yeah.
We loved it. We loved it so much. And it was just so hard to compete against some of the other things that were there. But really amazing, brilliant conversation piece. People should go check out that entry because it's right there.
It was in the humor category too. And I wonder, because gaming was one part of the broader campaign, they also had capybaras, like in not real capybaras, but fake capybaras that you could stroke on escalators going up to the subway too. And it took off. But the gaming component I do think was interesting. And I love your take on comfort games. And I also love that I think a lot of people play cozy games, but you're in your own home. To see a cozy or a comfort game extend to an arcade setting where in the video, obviously it's for beer, right? So you're having beers with your friends and cozy gaming, but out in the world with the capybara and a beer and your friends, I thought was interesting and something we don't usually see.
Yeah, just the expressions on their faces. It was lovely. And of course, maybe it's staged, maybe it's not. But yeah, I thought it was lovely too. And there's no like win conditions. It's just giving you positive feedback but that's okay. There are games like that now. There's like, what's the win condition on Sims? I worked on The Sims, right? And that's regarded as one of the best games of all time. And there's not really a win condition on it. I mean, all Sims are probably going to die if you play it eventually, right?
Yeah.
If you play it long enough and they age out, or you build your pool wrong or something. But it's about the experience, just like that very fuzzy arcade machine.
I want to talk a little bit about trends that we saw. One of the things I was a little bit surprised by, as you know, work a lot in the UGC space. And there were definitely a handful of submissions of people who are building within Roblox or, islands for Fortnite, but less than I thought. So that was interesting to me. And I don't know if we're kind of getting over. There have been criticisms, and there's been valid criticisms of people who are just building a game because that's what they think they should do without creative strategy. And at the end of the day, this is the Lions, which awards creativity in gaming. Although I do think there are some creative examples here. This entry I personally loved. It didn't make it to the short list. I'm not even sure if I voted for it for the short list, but it was the Salvation Army, which is a thrift store in America, built a thrift store within Roblox that allowed people to thrift digital clothing. And they were doing it to build brand connection with Salvation Army, to drive people to Salvation Army. But I also think there's a interesting conversation on sustainability of also being able to thrift your digital goods, which maybe you keep forever, but maybe it was a moment of self-expression. And rather than just have it in a game, to sell it to someone else for a discounted price, I thought was a really unique concept. Any thoughts on any of the Roblox or the UEFN entries that we saw?
So very much. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that one up. I was disappointed because I couldn't play that one. Like I saw the entry and I tried to find it and it had, it was no longer there in Roblox, but I loved the idea. And so in my book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, I talk about the motivators of play. And one of the more modern motivators of play is self-expression. And self-expression as a motivator of play didn't make as much sense in a world where we didn't have the internet, we didn't have scale, we didn't have multiplayer as prominent, right? You're just like playing for yourself, and maybe you're intrinsically motivated enough that you're having fun just playing digital paint or something. But now that you have these big platforms, self-expression, the entirety of League of Legends is basically funded on people buying skins. They're like, you can't, like, the purchases don't really tie to gameplay terribly much. Like, you can unlock a champion here or there, but mostly it's like, I just want to look good. I want people to see me differently. And so what I loved about the Salvation Army piece was that it spoke to that very real driver of play, like of that motivator of play, self-expression, in a way that like was very accessible. And it also like, you know, some of the places that people get into trouble in a game like Roblox is like monetization, right? And it's like the opposite of exploitative monetization when you're like, hey, these are affordable outfits. These are, you know, these. And so it felt kind of like a joyful celebration of self-expression. And there was also this sense of immediacy, right? Like the pieces had a sort of, I couldn't verify this, of course, but it seemed like some of the pieces had a uniqueness, not all, right? But, or like a limited time sense. And so that leans into that. It's almost becomes like a game loop. Like you got to go in and get the piece before other folks. And that's almost like a status symbol or a form of mastery over the shopping. So there was a lot going on that I thought was very cool about that. And I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't continuing on because I thought it would be a neat addition to that space. But, you know, the fact that it wasn't available, because it was something that had launched, I think, in March, and we were judging in like early May, spoke to me about this ephemeral nature of the engagements. There were several interactive worlds or interactive experiences that were proposed to us that we had no way of evaluating the gameplay. And it's not a requirement, but, you know, there were several places where I felt like I might have been able to vote something higher if I had more than a video, like because the impact metrics didn't tell the full story. It was like, I don't know if this is quality. Like what you've given me doesn't. If you could give me a metric that says gameplay hours watched, that doesn't tell me that the game was good. That just tells me that you picked a streamer that had a lot of people following them, right?
And I think, so I do a lot of award submissions for our clients as a PR person. And I personally had a lot of learnings in this space as well of what metrics do we dive into and think like, that is a gray area. You just know how it was framed. And I think the hours watched of gameplay is very different than actual people who played the game, for instance. And so this is a learning that I'll be taking back whenever I'm doing award submissions for clients of what are the KPIs that would actually show or prove success and then use those. I have a feeling with a lot of these, the PR people do that and just the numbers weren't there. So there are other more vanity metrics, right? Or views, streams, that kind of thing, especially when you're working with paid influencers. But something interesting for the people who do award submissions, and is there any way in your submission that you can allow people access to the gameplay, which I know isn't possible, especially in these branded experiences. There's contracts. If you only have a Fortnite island for 2 months, how are jurors next year going to evaluate it? But something to keep in mind because there could be workarounds there.
And, you know, another experience that I rated highly, it didn't quite make it to the shortlist, but there was Ciara, I think, had done a Stranger Things collaboration, and they sent us like a full video of like their whole like raw gameplay, right? I thought that was really
that's cool. They weren't on my list. I didn't see that.
Like if I had like a list, there was many entries I wanted to bring back up because it's tough in that like segmented when I know not everybody's able to see all of the entries, but that I thought that was interesting, right? Like, and I think it builds trust as a juror when you're willing to show like raw gameplay or players experiencing your game, because it's tough when you just see some of those sanitized metrics. We're trying to award innovative celebration of brands through gameplay, and hours watched is not gameplay. Like searching for your island is not the same as playing your island, or you know, now time spent in the island, number of people downloading your game, those things start to become a little bit more compelling. But in the end, some of the things that are most compelling are like the conversions you get through that, right? Yeah. And one of the things one of our fellow jurors kept bringing up is like, what problem does this campaign solve? Yeah. Right. And that's one of the takeaways I want to bring back to my teams, because sometimes even game developers struggle with like measurable success criteria. And one thing I tell my teams all the time is make sure we're solving the right problem before we even start this thing. Do we know what success looks like? Have we agreed on the problem we're solving? And have we agreed on what that measurement looks like? If you don't do that before chasing the shiny, you might have a really great campaign and not have a language to articulate what was great about it. on these big global stages. And so you're giving yourself a gift, your future self a gift, by taking the time up front to say, like, what is the goal and how do we measure it? And have we built this campaign to measure that success? And I know it's tough when you have a big, great idea. I get it. I struggle with that too. But like, it was very evident which campaigns had done the work to set clear goals and drawn the line to clear impact, and which campaigns have like chased a bit of a shiny and were like, yeah, a lot of people showed up. You're like, that is great.
And some had huge metrics, right? Like there was the McDonald's Minecraft movie collaboration, where if you looked at the results of that by a purchase, it was insane. But I don't think it was even on our short list. It was on our original list of 30.
It got really close.
Yeah.
And that was a really long conversation for us. And that was a theme I wrote down. I don't know if we'll get to talking about it on Wednesday, but for me, a thing that kept coming up was big brand plus big brand creates an illusion of innovation by scale, right? Like you just look at the numbers, like, oh my God, that's so successful. But like, is it success we've seen before? Like, does it deserve an award over and over again? Or does the conversation need to move to something else? Like sometimes you just have two big brands, you put them together, those people are going to show up regardless, right? And sometimes that's on not telling the story in a specific way that's like solving a problem or something. If you focus on the volume as opposed to like change in behavior or something like that, if it's just raw visits instead of like longitudinal behavior. But yeah, that was something I wrote down in my notebook, was like, big brand plus big brand can create this illusion of innovation. But then when you poke at it, you're like, this is safe. It is templated.
And I think that's one of the things we kept coming back to as well. Like Cannes Lions rewards creativity. So there were some really good campaigns, which I'm including the Minecraft McDonald's in there, when it looks at the results and also the craft behind it too. But there wasn't something deeper. Like all of the winners, even on a much smaller scale, like they were so well thought out and executed and clever. And I think every single person in the room and on the jury thought like, man, I wish I would have been part of that. And there were clear winners in that category. Let's talk a little bit about real world problems, because I mean, we can talk about, I think all of the winners solved very clear problems, but there are a couple of entries this year that I was blown away by that solved very tangible real world, not just gaming problems. And I'm thinking about virtual donors and also was it the fire catcher? I don't think that was the name of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember either of those two, or want to speak to those?
So the virtual donors, if we're getting that name correct, there was a really great campaign trying to inspire gamers to become organ donors. And there was actually a cluster of different campaigns around medical awareness and medical engagement. But this one stood out because it seemed to tie particularly into the Fortnite gameplay loop particularly well. But essentially the hook was like, if you register as an organ donor, you can unlock this mod that helps you bring 8 people back to life in the game, as you will bring people back to life in your passing in real life, right? And it's a very compelling story when you like see somebody in a game spawn these 8 hearts. You're like, what is going on, right? Yeah. And there's like a unique sort of icon associated with the mod and everything. And I love that you brought out too, like there's a very specific storytelling element to this too. Like this, do you want to talk about the specific mod developer?
Yeah. So I love mod author stories. It's one of my favorite things I get to do with PR, is to tell the stories of the people behind the creations. And this campaign was started in Belgium. I think it was listed under charity too. So it's a nonprofit. There was not a huge budget for this by any means. And the organizers or the creators of this found a mod author who I believe was based in New Zealand, whose wife was actually on the lung transplant list. And he created this mod in 3 different titles. And 8 isn't just a random number. It was that if the average organ donor can save up, a young organ donor can save up to 8 lives. So it was tangible. It was well thought out. And also to get the mods, you had to actually sign up through the registry of the Belgian site. And there were, as you mentioned, a couple of others in this realm, but there wasn't that direct connected action. This was the only one that did make it to the shortlist that I don't know if I could have seen move up to a bronze. This was the only one that I felt strongly about that didn't get there.
Yeah, it was really it was a contender for sure, and and they also were just very good at their storytelling. Like the case video is very strong, and I love that they chose multiple games. Like Fortnite got the most engagement by far, but I love that you're trying to meet players where they are, give them a variety of options. That was an interesting conversation in the room because people were like, well, some of these games, like maybe the gameplay benefit isn't as large. And so you start getting, and that's the difficulty when you start getting up into the metal, like and it's very evident, right? Like every time you clear a bar, the nature of the conversation changes and the nature of the scrutiny changes. Yep. So something that we were like all vibing on, suddenly was like, but what about that level of craft, or what about that level of impact? Because now and so it was very interesting to see that where we could be kind of all in agreement about a thing, and then when we took the next level of scrutiny, it was very clear, like, this one is where it needs to be, and it doesn't have enough to bring it to the next level. But like, great work. And another one of the pieces that I was on my short list of things I wanted to bring back for the short list was and I almost it was this or the one we're going to talk about in a second, but first person surgeons, I think it was called.
I liked that one too.
It was great. It's a partnership between a medical school and a prominent esports professional, and very thoughtful curriculum around basically like using, I think it was Call of Duty, but basically saying like, hey, the skills you learn in these games are the same skills you need to be good at surgery. And we're going to walk you through that, like situational awareness and like teamwork and these things. I thought it was really compelling, and I loved how it really broke down what a pro esports player does in a way that can be applied to other things, and really used games and the fun games bring to engage these surgeons a different way. I think one of the reasons it didn't click for me just yet was like it's like so early that like the impact numbers weren't there for me to like really pitch it in the room when it didn't clear initially number. But like I hope they'll like continue and come back. Like I hope that has the legs to get there eventually, because that was a really cool application of like brands and gaming and everything together.
Yeah, and that real world impact. But it was, I agree, too early to tell on that one. And then the other one that I mentioned was called Fire Catchers. And so obviously with climate change, fires, especially in Europe, especially in south of France, are becoming a major problem. And there's cameras everywhere all over the forest in France, but there aren't enough people, and the AI apparently isn't fine-tuned enough to detect fires. And so what they did is they put on Twitch, so streaming platform, when someone's waiting there for their favorite streamer, it's just idle time, but you have engaged gamers. And so they partnered with streamers in France that before they came on to stream, they streamed the forest and gave gamers the options. If you were to see smoke, you flag it in the chat, and it prevented, I think they said 5 major forest fires. Yeah. And I thought that was such one, it is a real world problem. How do we get people who are eager to give attention, to look at something, to pay close attention to something? And I feel like the person who created that person is a gamer, right? They know about Twitch. They know about that idle time. I thought it was such a creative idea to solve a very real world problem.
Oh yeah, that one was, it was and that was one of a couple of them that got pitched by folks that didn't necessarily clear, but was brought back. And it was also interesting how that conversation changed, because I think it made it to our short list, but we weren't able to get it to bronze. And I think one of the things that reflects kind of the interesting tension in this category was it's a really great use of Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
But when once we got it to I believe shortlist, like, it was difficult to say, like, but is it like its use of Twitch and it's gaming adjacent, but is it gameplay?
Mm-hmm.
And like when we looked at the notes, we're like, well, we were inspired by gameplay when we designed this, and there's a little bit of like, okay, I report this forest fire, but like there wasn't really a game loop, right? And so to say it's like inspired by gameplay, but it didn't. And you don't have to, so it's hard to find the game play or the game that part of it. It's game adjacent. And but it was such a noble cause, and it's such a noble thing. And it's tough. I think one of the hard things for juries is to like just sit and evaluate the work as it is in the moment, because it's a bunch of creatives and we could go off and be like, well, what about this? And what about this? And like, no. Okay. What is in the brief? What happened? What is the actual like mathematical implication? And sometimes it'll be like, we're going to do X and Y in future years, but that's not what we're evaluating. We're evaluating what got submitted now, what the impact is now. It'd be great to like see it come back and evolve. Like, well, I'd love for them to come back and come with like a tighter motivational loop that gets even more results. Like, oh my God, like that's a great start. But that was the nature of kind of trying to figure out where that landed. But really cool, innovative idea. And you know, they did say that they're kind of getting some traction at a national level, which is amazing.
One of the things that you mentioned when we talked about virtual donors and how they there was modded content for 3 different games is the type of work that we saw spoke to such a wide variety of gaming audiences. I think when I initially went into it, I thought it would be more mainstream, like, you know, just FIFA, which we did see. And we do have winners in those categories as well. But there were, I think, very typically underrepresented gamers in gaming throughout. Were there any underrepresented games that had submissions that you were impressed by?
There was some heat around work coming from Latin American communities, and like some of it was around like the Golden Island, you know, and I thought I voted that one reasonably highly, but I think it was tough for the impact to like tell the story of like, how is this impact proportional? You know, like it had, like, what makes this, it seemed like it, to me, it was very impactful for the region, but how do you like tell the story in a way that people from other regions understand that that's really impactful? But it was that I think La Isla de la Diversion for Golden, and it felt like they were pretty authentic, and it seemed like the numbers kind of tracked for people actually playing the island. But there were a couple of things from that. There were also some cool. There was a cool program for kind of trying to use gaming to get people out of sort of recidivism and life of crime, for lack of a better word. And that was really cool, a wonderful campaign. It bore some similarities to some stuff that had been recognized earlier. And so that was, I think, one of the challenges there sometimes is like when things are very directly correlated to prior work, is like, how do you find the differentiating factor? But I loved seeing those threads.
And maybe not just underserved, right? I think the different types of fandom is more what I was thinking of. For instance, there was a very strong submission. It's completely targeted towards the Dungeons and Dragons community done by IKEA, which I thought was so clever. So apparently I'm not in the Dungeons and Dragons community. A lot of people get their names, their gaming names, from former IKEA catalogs of. And apparently IKEA catalogs haven't been published since 2021. And at the, I believe, Milan Games Week, IKEA came and they published a Dungeons and Dragon gaming catalog for all of those fans to pick their favorite names from it. It didn't, I don't think it was shortlisted.
It did not, yeah.
Okay.
think it was shortlist, but it didn't clear bronze.
But I thought that was such a creative idea for a very particular type of fandom that could only have been created by someone who did deeply understand the community.
Yes, that was, and it was lovely. That was like a really great pilot of an idea. That was one of those ones where we're like, all of us were like, oh, I wish I had one of those, first of all. Second of all, like, oh, I wish I'd been involved in something like that. And then also like the impact was very limited. And so it's like beautiful, but like you can't help but fall in love with the video of the fans picking up that book in the convention center, right? And just literally just yelling brand names of these. And like when you look at the like celebrating brand through gameplay, like that's literally the definition of the category, right? Which is why it's, even though it's a very simple solution, it makes sense in the shortlist. Like if someone's just yelling lack, because that's they've pulled the name of the lack chair out of the book, like that's interesting. And there was a lot of love for that there. And so and that speaks to not all of the solutions need to be highly technical or highly complicated, and some of the stuff we recognized was more simple from a technical perspective, but it had a clear theory of change and it had clear impact. So it didn't need to move mountains to do what it did. I'm going to shout out another thing that's just kind of random, but it's another one of the ones I wanted to pull out. Like I wanted to be able to promote, but I think was a cool example. There was a lot of heat in like the new technologies category. There was a lot of stuff that I think was really cool and just it was hard for people to get their head around maybe. But the Fantasy Herd, did that come up for you?
Yeah, I rated that one quite highly
too. So it's a New Zealand, unfortunately I'm forgetting the exact brand of the milk, but go check out the Fantasy Herd submission, because they basically, to promote their product, they used wearable technology for cows to track milk production and health of the cows. And all the cows had names, and you could like draft them onto fantasy teams. And it like they had measurable impact on sales, and their fans want to see another season. And like really interesting use of wearable technology, which is what fit with that category, to drive this fantasy gameplay element. I thought that was really interesting and probably more complex than the jury may have even really truly appreciated. That was really cool. There was another one from the National Guard, which was like using VR to help people understand how they respond to like wildfires and other they had
that one.
That one was I really liked the results on that one. Like there were, first of all, VR is hard, and this was a touring VR installation, and so for that to even work, good job, because you're like, but showing people how to engage in teamwork to put out a forest fire or something. There's a lot of gamers who want to connect to each other, right? Yeah. Like that's one of the companionship is one of the more modern motivators of play, multiplayer, and we're losing third spaces, right? And so to go into a high school and show players a multiplayer experience that gives them skills that help them understand how to keep communities safe, like really hit to something like a lot of young people feel unsafe or unmoored by climate change or just by disasters and so that was a really cool use of gameplay to give a thread to like, oh, there are things I can do in my community to help each other, to team up with other people to help in an emergency. And so I really liked that use of VR technology. That was very cool.
Oh yeah, I wish I would have seen that one. I didn't think I had any VR.
Yeah, that was a category that it must have been our side.
Okay, interesting. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the winners, right? And maybe we start with the one that you had brought back, which I believe got a bronze.
It did get a bronze, yeah.
Okay, do you want to talk about that one and what was so compelling?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's this mechanic where we get the mathematical shortlist, and then we kind of look and we're like, okay, there's duplicates and are things in the right categories, and have we, and once we figure things out, if there's space, jurors can bring up one per juror something that they think might have been overlooked. And that was really tough because we just talked about a bunch of things we liked. And I had a bunch of them scroll down. But there was one entry that had spoken to me, and there were a number of things I know about the gaming community, right? Like horror is very big right now. We didn't have a lot of representation from Asian gaming in general. And we also didn't, like, what had managed to make it through, there wasn't a lot of, like, we had seen kind of a decline in like the Roblox and Fortnite stuff, but not a lot of like indie gaming things. And there was this submission from the Cow Corporation in Japan, Silent Cleaning. And it's this, basically this 1 or 2 hour indie game you can download from Steam. It's all in Japanese, although I hope they'll localize it to English. But the premise was build a narrative-based horror game where the mechanics are totally centered around the Cow products. And they very intentionally used game design to make it so you had to like differentiate between similar products. So like they literally had streamers like reading the labels of their products on air, not because they were sponsored, but because like that was the gameplay and they're like really into it. But they had all the elements of horror, like jump scares and everything. It had a very distinct sort of, I call it classic in my book, but like lo-fi aesthetic, which is smart if you're doing something and you're maybe not a AAA studio. But the results were so compelling. Like sales of their products jumped 200%. And these are cleaning products that have been around for 100 years or more. And influencer engagement was massive, like 200,000 downloads of this free Steam game about cleaning in Japan. It was charting on Steam. Like it was, and this is a cleaning brand that had nothing to do with gaming. And like a really bold choice for them to go in this, and they just embraced the genre fully. And what I also loved about their case study was it wasn't just, we're going to do a game, right? Because I've seen a lot of that, right? Like you can see it all the time in Fortnite levels, like we did a map, but they don't think about the game loop. They don't think about motivation. They don't think about, and so there was a lot of craft in there when in the description, they're like, the last level is very thoughtfully designed with like rows of toilets to like increase the tension and the speed and so that it'll really get people engaged, right? Like there were very intentional design decisions made to make it engaging for players, not just like a transaction, but like a quality experience. And that's what got these big Japanese streamers, horror game streamers, like really into it, just super broadcasting it. I think they said they had 3,200 videos on YouTube of the game.
Organic, you're not
organic,
paid.
Right? And so it was just, the more I watched it, the more I looked at the numbers, I'm like, I can't look away from this one. It's a celebration of the subgenre in gaming. It's a brand that, like, by all rights, should not have been successful at this, and they're thriving, and people are out there buying this product and like cleaning their houses more and enjoying the jump scares as a result. So I brought that back to the group. And the other thing I knew was it was one of those ones that, because it had only been submitted in one category. Yeah. A lot of the jury hadn't seen it. And so because it hadn't cleared in its one category, I spoke with one juror beforehand and had mentioned that there weren't a lot of things from the Asian continent. I was like, I think this is my only chance to get this thing in front of the jury. I don't think the other side has seen this. So it's, of all the things, like some of the other things I liked, I knew everybody had seen because they had been submitted in multiple categories. So it had kind of had its chance. But this one in particular, I was like, I honestly think a lot of the jury hasn't seen it because of the way the math works and everything. And so I'm going to, and so put that out there and was pleasantly surprised, and it made its way to a bronze.
And I'm so grateful you did, because I hadn't seen it. And I also think when you're reviewing so many in the beginning, you might not focus on 200,000 downloads when we're comparing it to other games doesn't sound huge. But then when we really talked about it as a jury, to be like, they launched this game on Steam. There wasn't a huge marketing budget behind it. How did they even handle the discoverability? And they still had 200,000 downloads. Like, when you put all of the different criteria, it's truly incredible what they were able to do. Another one that a lot of people championed which I believe was silver. I'm talking Skittles Taste the Rainbow. Was it
Yeah, the
silver?
the Skittles flute.
With a Skittles flute, which is, well, this with the capybara therapy were the two most bizarre entries, but it just absolutely delighted people. And what was funny is I think jury members changed opinions along the way. And by the end, people were just obsessed with the flute. Do you want to talk about the activation?
Yeah. So the the Skittles gaming flute. You're watching all these submissions, and a lot of them are, hey, here's this Fortnite level, or here and then Skittles just comes in hard at you with like this super retro thing, and it's like the tagline's like "blow your way to victory." I'm like, I'm sorry, what are we doing? And they took a real flute and they turned it into a game controller that you had to play as a flute, like blow through it and play to control a game. And then they did this because they were looking for a specific community of gamers to connect with. And they identified this as challenge gamers, right? Speedrunners, et cetera, right? Folks who, and I was in the jury room, I was trying to kind of give some more context for the jury. I was like, this group of gamers, they take the conditions of winning that already exist in a game and say, like, that's not enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the motivation of play I discussed, mastery, right? Like, it's not enough to master what everybody else does. I'm going to create additional constraints and master those, because that's what makes me feel good, is like being the best of the best, right? And so, and often that means, in their demo video, it's like people who are like playing open world games with the DDR dance pad or something, like really wild stuff. And so they were like, wild? Why not? And the thing about the Skittles gaming flute, like we saw a lot of things that were like controller mods for like an Xbox controller or things like that. But this thing, like, it was so brand inspired. When you talk about brand integration, if you go and look at it, it is bright red, and all of the keys are Skittles, right? Like, it's literally playing the rainbow. The box, like, it talks to you when you open it.
They did bring one.
They did bring one.
So we could try it out. It was impressive.
It's if you have physical media and you can bring it in, it's very compelling. But just, and this one, they sent, and they made 6, I think, of these flutes, and they sent them to influencers and let them do like 72 hours straight on these things. I'm like, I have the physical devices I've bought that don't last for 72 hours. They created this bonkers peripheral and then sent it out on faith to people whose job it is to basically break things and let it go. And the results, their communities loved it, and they had, deep chat engagement, right? Like, and so in this case, we talked about downloads. We talked about like the difference between minutes watched versus minutes played. Now, this type of engagement, this was in influencer and co-streamer, I think.
Yeah.
No, it's use of humor. Okay, yeah. So use of humor is a little bit more flexible, right? Like and so it's, the humor was the audience's relationship with the streamers. And it's a little bit of schadenfreude, right? Because you've got this streamer and they're like running out of breath because they can't control the thing. And so in that case, looking at the goals the brand has, it's how much are they in the picture in this conversation? And they literally had like how often they were mentioned in the chat. Which was like once a minute for like the whole weekend. Yes. And so they were and that speaks to having your goals clear, right?
Yep.
It wasn't just like people watching it. That's quality engagement for the brand. People, and they showed some of the chat too. It's very much people being like, Skittles, we love you. This is great. What is this? We don't understand it, but we love it. It's just, it's like deranged genius. I just like it. So many people had to keep saying yes to that.
Yeah, exactly. And for that and the capybara, like, I want to meet the people who pitched that idea and then the person who actually greenlit that, because there were so many times along the way that someone could have just been like, what the fuck? Or really? Also, it was Skittles' first gaming activation ever.
Was it? I didn't have that context.
Yeah, that's what it said in the video. And of all the different, snack products that are advertising in gaming, and this didn't come off as an ad at all. It was truly just organic chaos on brand. And it delighted the streamers, the audience, and every single person in the jury.
Yeah, and the funny thing was like, it didn't have to come with like a coupon code. It didn't have to come with a giveaway, which is a very common thing. Like there are a lot of coupon codes and giveaways that come through. And that's a conversation that comes up, right? Like that's a very specific type of activation. And then we have to consider how much of the behavior changes because people like free stuff versus how much of the behavior changes because people are genuinely interacting with it, right? Like that heightens the conversation when you're throwing the free stuff at people. But this wasn't like, there wasn't even like it was just like this joyful activation around the thing. It's just go do this stuff. At least as far as it was presented in the case video. Yeah. I wish I had seen the streams live. I think that would have been really fun. And that's part of what you want from these things. Is like the wish for the visceral participation.
Yeah.
I wonder what it would. And I think we were all a little surprised. Like we saw it go to the short list, and then we saw it go to the Bronson. Like as a collective, as we start talking through these things, and that level goes up, but it held as we started to evaluate.
And different people championed it at different times. Like it was definitely a beloved entry of everyone. All right, we are going to shift because we only have 10 minutes left because we are in a recording studio in Cannes and all the influencers are here. So the fact that we were able to get in was a miracle. And we haven't even talked about the true winner of pretty much everything. And that was Supercell. I believe they had 4 entries shortlisted and 3 were placed, including the Grand Prix and the Gold Award. Do you want to start with maybe your favorite of all the Supercell entries?
You know, for me, it was really tough because like the one that spoke to me like the most was probably the Cracked Royale. Like that one I kept coming back to, which was a localized campaign in Brazil where and it was a low budget one that was recognized for breakthrough on a budget, but where they recognized that players in Brazil, 1 in 3 players in Brazil just don't upgrade their phone when their phone's cracked. And so they found a way to kind of uphold players for their skill in playing the game while their phones were cracked. And when we started talking about, like, I already liked it. I thought it was very clever, and the numbers were really huge, right? Like that, it's like
385,000 people, new users, I think. Yeah.
Something like that. Really, and for a constrained market, right? Like for a single market activation, really, really compelling. And then when we started talking about it too, we were like, you know, that actually involves more of the community. Like it's very clever too, because it's very hard to just get that video on your own.
Yeah.
Like you need somebody to play with you. You need someone to help or something to help you videotape this broken phone and record it. And so it inherently just creates this conversation. And so it saw a community. That community self-reported feeling seen, and it had this like halo effect of growing. So like that one I really loved. Like it was tough because we had some other entries. Supercell had a really great year, but that just had undeniable impact.
Yeah.
But I loved that entry for what it did for that market.
I like that was your favorite, because my favorite, I liked a lot of what they did, but my favorite was shortlisted, but I don't think was placed, and it was called D-Balloons, and it was in the audio visual content. And what they did is they created a trailer video for Clash Royale, and they did it through balloons, like just balloon characters. And they used over 10,000, and they did a behind the scenes video of it. And for me, just the craft of it, how wild it was. And one of the things that I kept bringing up is, in a world of just AI slop, someone creating something just so beautiful and bizarre and weird. I'm really glad we live in a world where there's a budget for this, right? But I do think it was also entered into other categories other than just gaming. And then let's talk about the 2 winners. Maybe we talk about gold first, which was pocket-sized halftime show. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I'm also gonna say too, like one thing I struggled with was like how strong a year Supercell had, right? Like I was really grateful for the integrity measures that the lines folks had, because like I had several questions several times, like, is this okay? Are we doing the right thing? And they had watchers in the room monitoring all our conversation and taking notes. They've like double checked all the numbers several times. There's checks every time we moved up a meta level to make sure everything was, because, like it's tough like when so many entries are strong coming from one company. But these two entries in particular, both of them are these like once in a lifetime kind of campaigns. But this one in particular, pocket-sized halftime show, I didn't get to see either of these in my first round of judging. I only saw them in the second round. But this one, essentially, the problem they were trying to solve was they didn't feel like they could afford a Super Bowl spot, but they wanted to engage in some way. And so they're like, well, what if we just run a halftime show of our own during the Super Bowl? But then what talent would we involve? And then they attached to a narrative that an artist was, who's the artist?
Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne was
snubbed.
Lil Wayne was snubbed from the previous halftime show, I think. And so they were like, well, what if we gave Lil Wayne the floor? But they also kind of like leaned into the brief of like Lil Wayne, small, the giant, like the small giant thing, and like pocket-sized halftime show. And so they did this. So for, I believe, the whole weekend, like every match was interrupted by a halftime show that like flipped the perspective to landscape and did like a full production value combination, live action and full rendered video, full on halftime show with a song and characters from the game and the craft of everything in the video, right? Like so many references to the game. The Coldplay meme is there. Kiss Cam meme is there. There's like so many things there that just it just felt like a love letter. And what they ended up with was we kept coming back to like the impact, like the major media mentions. Like if your goal is to get press during the Super Bowl and you've got Billboard and Campaign Magazine and other folks giving you press time during that media cycle without a Super Bowl ad, that is achieving your goals.
Absolutely. And I think they did get a lot of gaming press too, but it was able to transcend gaming into cultural and mainstream in a way that is hard no matter what. But when you're already entering in a completely competitive media landscape leading up to the Super Bowl, it was incredible. And I know we only have a couple minutes left, so let's talk about the Grand Prix, which was Copycat's Welcome. So for Copycat's Welcome, it was Clash Royale, right?
Yes.
Clash Royale is one of probably the most popular mobile game, but they have a lot of knockoffs and a lot of copycats. And as we know, IP issues are huge in mobile gaming. And so they created such a brilliant campaign to solve this problem. Do you want to share?
Yeah, they basically they said, hey, we acknowledge that these copycats exist. And they created basically a web form where you could tell how much time you had spent in that game and how much relative investment you had given. And that would translate into an offer for in-game currency that you could use in Clash Royale to either come back to Clash Royale or use it for the first time, and presumably a generous amount of currency. And the case video showed a lot of folks talking about the message this sent to the community, right? And the thing that stuck out for me here was like how players felt like their time was valued, like how they felt like, and it, as a video game professor, like I hear my students talk about like how sometimes they feel guilty about spending money on microtransactions. And I know I have like downloaded the wrong game sometimes, and like that doesn't feel good. Sometimes you get like a couple levels in, you realize this isn't the one you thought it was because like they've done a lot of investment on the first 3 levels and it just falls right off. And then you're like, well, what do I do about that money? Maybe I just don't want to engage in this genre. And so what's lovely about this is it kind of just, it's just this blank slate. It's like, hey, it doesn't matter if like you got tricked or if you spent money in other places, you are welcome here. Your time is honored. Come back and give this a shot, and no judgment. And it makes it kind of reduces the stakes of that really difficult to navigate discoverability problem on the app stores in a way that celebrated players and seemed to resonate. And the results were undeniable, like millions of players.
I think it was 1.65 million new players and over 5 million re-engaged players.
Yes, just bonkers, like impact, like very difficult to ignore. And obviously they're a big game, so they can do that swing, but like it's still when you set clear goals and you do that sort of stuff, and then the quality of that, part of that is in the case study as well, being able to show like that real community engagement. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like you see one or two influencers, and then it's like a string of 20 people talking, and you see the other stuff in the supporting notes. And you're like, okay, it does really seem like this genuinely resonated, and the numbers are there.
Yeah.
But it sends this. I liked that it sent the message that player time matters. Mm-hmm. And that it's okay if you make mistakes. It's okay if you go and experiment with these other people. You're always welcome back. Or I really liked that, and I loved that seemed to resonate with players.
And to solve a problem just in a constructive way of maybe there's lawsuits too, but they aren't just out there suing people or talking about how horrible this is for the industry, but instead turning it into a positive, a very real problem.
And it's a confidence in the quality of your own game, right? It's like
100%.
We don't need to do that. We know that we have what it takes. Just come back and give us a chance.
Yeah. So Cheryl, I'm going to end with one final question since we probably only have 30 seconds left. After seeing all of this, what do you hope that brands who are going to be activating an in-game take away? Like if you were invited back on the jury next year, what would you like to see?
I think, if there's one thing you take away from the Skittles case study, it's that gamers are not a monolith. There are many sub-genres of gamers, and knowing which community within gaming you're engaging with, having strong goals, strong success criteria, and communicating how you hit those things are a path to better success. Also, I talk a lot about this in my book, but the gamers of today are not the gamers from 10 or 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. If you're making your experiences for what you wanted when you were growing up, you might be missing the plot, because the gamers of today were raised in a world where Roblox and Minecraft and blockier graphics and more accessible, comforting, casual gameplay is the norm. And so even if you're not developing in those environments, be careful like what you place value in. Do you really need to spend a ton of money on really great graphics on your standalone game? Silent Cleaning says no, right? Like but quality of gameplay, gamers know. They know if you've done your homework. And that, I think, is a big takeaway for me, is like gamers know. They can tell. And they're gravitating towards places where the craft is there, the Skittles flute, the silent cleaning, going back to Clash Royale with the big offers, right? So seek out partnerships with game developers. And there are a lot of game developers looking for work that'd be happy to talk to you about your activations if you're a brand looking to work in this space. So there's lots of opportunity there. Or you can pick up my book, The Game Development Strategy Guide, or just read the free first chapter that talks about the motivators of play. There's lots of material out there for you to learn more and engage gamers where they are.
Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me on the NAVIC podcast. And it was such a pleasure serving on the jury with you. And now it's time for us to go have some rosé.
I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@navic.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Navic has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.navic.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Navic Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.navic.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.